have today's technologies affected and changed forensic science? This is the topic we're going to discuss with Mark Mogle, and the partner of our interview series about technologies and science is Team Telecom Armenia. How has the development of the current technologies in general and artificial intelligence in particular affected forensic science and the everyday job of forensic scientists?
Well, that's a very big question. In terms of technology development, forensic science is a applied science, if you will. We take science and different research that is going on and then try to apply it to questions that are relevant to the criminal justice system. So in terms of how technology has changed, so the evolution of bringing DNA into the forensic laboratory, and as DNA capabilities and sensitivity has changed, our practices have had to change and evolve as well. Going back to the crime scene, DNA is much more sensitive now. We can get DNA from what we would call touch DNA. So if somebody handles an object or a piece of clothing that they've been wearing, we can potentially get DNA from that, even if there is no bodily fluids on that. So we have had to adapt how we handle the crime scene because of the technology adaptions that are happening in the laboratory. Same thing in terms of digital evidence. As the world becomes more digital and we have computers in everyday items, the number of computers in our cars or even into our refrigerators now, there's the Internet of Things, and there's a forensic discipline and application that evolves along with those technology enhancements. And what it really takes is curious investigators who ask very good questions. So it's really important to have communication between investigators and the forensic scientists that can answer that question. And when they say, can science tell me this? Mm-hmm. And the forensic scientist might say, I've never had that in a case before, but yes, I think it's possible. But underneath that, we need sound science and those processes that have quality assurance built in, validation of those processes, so that any evidence that is presented in court is ultimately found to be reliable and somewhat independent of influence. And that's how you create that public trust. Because in all, personally, I believe the public generally has a lot of trust in science and scientists and the work that the forensic scientists produce. And so when forensic evidence is introduced in court, I think it carries a lot of weight, be it with the judges or with the public themselves.
So you believe that the public generally trusts these technologies and forensic science in general. What is that trust based on? Only like the pop culture, movies and so on, where they see and find some information about forensic science?
Well, it's certainly informed by the media, television, etc. I think there's a certain foundational level where there's expectation that science is science and that it's not necessarily influenced by a lot of cultural things. So you take that general sort of expectation that science has standards that are sort of boundaries, across countries. There's general scientific principles, and we are applying to forensic science. Where the sort of the media and the cultural aspects come in is the power that forensic science has and how you can use DNA to solve a case or digital evidence to solve a case, and how that's presented in television shows that really captivates the public's interest in forensic science. And then in turn, it translates down into the schools and education as well. One of the things that teachers might use in middle school is bringing forensic science into the school to get the kids interested in, because they might not be interested in chemistry or biology, but if they are helping to solve a crime and apply science, that is getting them interested, you know, in science in general, and ultimately probably helping them stay and perhaps pursue science, you know, as a career down the line. So there's you know, many benefits to that. We have seen it, you know, in the United States, we have programs for kids and even younger than middle school, and even some of those are adapting forensic science as a way to get elementary school kids interested in science and math.
The TV shows and the media that you mentioned, aren't they also kind of misleading because they create expectations in people that are not really realistic?
Well, the main way that they're probably a bit misleading is that the speed in which the results come back. You know, not everything is solved within an hour-long TV show, and so there are some misconceptions that come with it, but it's a little bit of a trade-off as well. It's also educating the public on the broad principles of forensic science, and hopefully that outweighs some of the misconceptions in terms of the speed with which those results can be obtained.
Getting back to my first question, do the current technologies affect the ways that we can work with DNA in general? Have they created any ways to work with DNA that were not possible before having, well, the current technologies and AI?
Well, when I started working in the laboratory, it was right when DNA was being introduced into forensic science. And what has really changed is the number of cases that we have applied it to. When we used older technology, some of the cases could take weeks to do, and they used some radioactive materials and basically creating X-ray films. And now the speed of which is done, a case then could take 4 weeks to do or longer, and now we can do that in much shorter time. And many of the things can be automated with machines, or what we call robots. They don't look like robots, but things that help with pipetting and minimize human error. And those things can help speed it along, make it less costly, and then you can apply it to broader number of cases and help solve low-level crimes, which ultimately help solve higher-level crimes, because I think there's a general understanding that people may progress, or if they are doing one type of crime, they might be involved in another type of crime. So if we can identify the people committing criminal acts sooner, the better it is for the public as well.
Can we try to imagine how these technologies will affect forensic science in, well, nearest future? Or like in 10 years?
Well, there's certainly a balance to be had. And so what the forensic science community does is work, basically help take the lead from what the public wants. So for instance, when you're talking about DNA, privacy issues always are a topic as well. And so there's a balance between privacy and the work that the forensic science laboratories will do. So we definitely follow our laws, and ultimately those are sort of decisions that are made by others outside of how we will take and apply this and make sure that it's consistent within a legal framework.
What privacy issues exactly are you talking about?
So privacy issues can be like within criminal cases, this sample was collected for this criminal purpose. Can you apply it to other type of aspects? And then there's may get involved into different types of genetics and relationships and things like that. The one thing I will say, the traditional DNA is really part of the DNA that is non-coding, so it's very much variable from person to person and doesn't really carry a lot of significance, and that's why we're able to use it to differentiate between people. But so there's always those type of concerns that we need to balance when you're talking about any sort of advancements in DNA.
So we discussed the topic of forensic science and its role in criminal justice system. I would like to speak a little more about that. Has this role kind of changed or evolved in the last years, especially after the development of today's technologies and the introduction of AI and its capabilities?
Well, I would say forensic science is always evolving, and I think there's still, just in general in policing, how AI will impact what we do. There's probably certain areas where the AI is being applied, for instance, in drug analysis and predicting, having unknown compounds that may enter into the laboratory, and we have data, but we don't necessarily have this sample in our library. There's research being done now as far as can we use AI to predict when we have this chemical signature what this compound actually is. So it won't necessarily replace the chemist, but will help the chemists do their job. That's just one bit of research where AI is being used and investigated.
What other spheres can appear where AI can affect forensic science?
That is still probably a question that a lot of people are asking as far as how it will impact forensic science. When it comes to areas related to computers and digital evidence, that is probably one area that you might expect AI to have some impact.
Is this your first visit to Armenia?
This is actually my third visit to Armenia.
And what's the main purpose or the main goal of your visit?
So my office within the Department of Justice and our colleagues at the Department of State helped. We were involved in the creation of the National Bureau of Expertises. Obviously, in Armenia. Obviously, a lot of this, it was done with Armenian leading the way, but we helped provide advice on how to create that organization. And that was 20 years ago, and they are celebrating their 20th anniversary as an independent forensic science organization supporting the criminal justice system in Armenia and the Armenian people as a whole.
So do you have information about what this NBE has been doing in Armenia for these 20 years, and how do you assess its operations?
Well, it is, I think, quite an achievement to grow at 20 years for an organization isn't very long, especially for a governmental organization. So they have progressed very well in terms of adopting the current generation of scientific equipment and investing in themselves. Most recently, I know they've started their own DNA laboratory, and it's, I believe, the first criminal DNA laboratory in Armenia. So that is something that is really noteworthy and notable progress that has been made at the National Bureau of Expertises.
Do we have in Armenia everything necessary, the technologies, tools, and other things for the development or for a normal level of working in the forensic science field?
I would say, in my experience, and I've been in a lot of forensic laboratories around the world, that the laboratory here at the National Bureau of Expertises has comparable equipment to most other national forensic laboratories. One of the things that I know that they have, that they may look to do is, and they are aligning their work with international standards issued by the International Organization for Standardization. And that is really important as far as aligning that work with the quality standards so that you are creating that safety net to ensure the reliability of the evidence that is appearing and being presented in court.
What's the most challenging thing about establishing a forensic laboratory?
It depends on the nature of the people. For some people, the science is the easy part, but maybe communicating it, to the people, or working is part of a system. So we can do great scientific work, but if police officers or the courts or other people that are stakeholders don't necessarily understand what we do or what we need to do our job well, then that's ultimately going to impact the usefulness of our work. So people that go into science often are very much into the science, but working across agencies and educating police officers and something doesn't necessarily come as naturally, but it's an important part of what we do.
Whose job is to do it? Well, to make sure all the parties understand what's going on, they cooperate and work together.
It's a two-way street. So obviously the management of the laboratory needs to be very much involved and proactive, because in the end the laboratory is just serving those needs of the criminal justice system. So we need to know what the important questions are at the time and then align our work accordingly.
You have had a huge contribution in development and establishment of forensic laboratories in many countries, not only in Armenia. What was the most difficult and challenging thing there?
Well, a challenging thing that can because one of the things that our office does is promote the adoption of international standards and the accreditation of forensic laboratories under those standards. So sometimes a challenge is the local accrediting bodies, while they are familiar with the standards issued, the international standards issued by ISO, they may have never applied it to a forensic laboratory. And in some instances, these standards are based on, a commercial enterprise where if you are testing and you are making pens and ink, you might have control over your input as far as your solvents and your pigments, et cetera. But the forensic laboratories don't have control over their input. They are coming from the crime scene and in various types of conditions and degradation. So the application of those standards to the forensic laboratories is a bit unique. And sometimes the local accrediting bodies don't necessarily have that experience in applying those standards to that. So that can be a challenge.
In your opinion, what can we do to improve, to level up the forensic capabilities of Armenia laboratory?
Well, in general, I would say just recognize the important value that they provide as a independent scientific organization that's supporting the criminal justice system, and provide support accordingly. In general, one of the things that we also try to do in terms of our work is help raise that forensic awareness as far as how valuable and useful it can be, because the forensic laboratories is a tool, but we need the awareness of the investigators, et cetera, to be able to think, hey, the forensic laboratory may be able to help me in this regard, and think to bring the evidence to the laboratory and take advantage of that. So they should have some level of understanding of what the laboratory can do, so that they can best use their mind as far as how the laboratory can help solve this individual case. Because the laboratories can't be out there looking at all the cases. We need our investigators to know what we're capable of, and then bring the evidence and help engage those scientists to help answer those questions that might be relevant in a particular investigation.
How can we ensure that the evidence that was collected in some crime scene and that should be analyzed in a forensic laboratory is collected in the right way, accurately, is not contaminated, if we can say so?
Well, one thing that I would say is in terms of that outreach that I mentioned earlier, in terms of the laboratory and helping educate the investigators, helping them be involved in informing those collection procedures, because really quality assurance and ensuring the protection and preservation of evidence starts at the crime scene. So even if the laboratory is not there, what is actually being done at the crime scene has to be informed by what the laboratory will actually need to do with that evidence. So communication there, and in encouraging the standardization of those practices, that those SOPs are aligned with quality practices as well, that the investigators take proper precaution to ensure that they don't contaminate the evidence themselves, or try to not have cross-contamination between different things. So the evidence packaging, is it packaged right? A lot of those things can be informed by the laboratory as well. And then just ensuring the chain of custody of the evidence, so that once it's collected, it's sealed properly, and we can know that it hasn't been handled by other people, and there's documentation along the way. You know, that's one of the really important things as far as the accreditation and the international standards, is just having that audit trail, if you will, that you can account for that evidence along the way and can account for everything that was done with the evidence in the laboratory as well. So in general, I would say quality and quality assurance starts at that crime scene, and that work needs to be done sort of hand in hand and informed by the laboratory themselves.
Do you have any information about how is this all done in Armenia, and are the investigators informed about all this? Are they doing things correctly?
I don't have any personal insights, into that. I know the National Bureau of Expertise does some outreach and education for the investigators. But my visits to Armenia have been very limited, unfortunately. So I don't have any personal insights, but I know the National Bureau of Expertise is taking a proactive role and trying to educate the investigators. Again, I would just reiterate the importance of quality, international standards, and having an openness as far as applying good scientific principles as far as quality, validation, et cetera, to the work that you do. So, and I know the scientists here in Armenia have a passion for their job and are very much enthusiastic about the work that they do.
Thank you for coming to us today.
All right, thank you very much.